Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Bold Metal Nerd coming at you with another one. This is going to be my final video where I talk about discographies. Basically, in this one, I'm going to be talking about uh, discographies that I have no desire to complete because there are some really terrible albums in these bands' catalogs. So let's go ahead and start off with a real easy one. Okay. Band in question came along at the tail end of the hair metal album era, made a huge splash. They made 3 really good albums. Vocalists split, and they've done nothing even remotely worthwhile since. And I am, of course, talking about Skid Row, self-titled debut right there. Sebastian Bach, an incredibly great singer. Great album. There's that one. I got to figure out what I'm putting these guys because my table space is a little limited because I have so many albums out. Next one they got, Slave to the Grind. They definitely went in a much more heavy direction with this. Absolutely fantastic album. In my opinion, their best one. And then we got Subhuman Race. Yeah, I know. Why isn't it in the actual Digipack? Well, the Digipack slowly disintegrated over time, and as you can see, that's an actual CD, not a CDR. So there you go. That's what happened to that one. And then after that, Sebastian left the band. They had a very bad breakup, and I guess rockstar egos have prevented them from reuniting. And honestly, at this point, I don't know if they're really capable of doing good music because they've been really terrible for more than 20 years at this point. So I don't really much give a shit what they do. Anyway, that's that. The next band that I am going to talk about basically started off. Their first album is incredibly legendary and I would say really a must-have for any rock fan in general. But after that, everything else is pretty optional. I, of course, am talking about Guns N' Roses. Appetite for Destruction. Absolute masterpiece. This should be in literally everyone's collection. Pretty universal on that one. After that, this EP came out, GNR Lies. I like it, and I think it's fairly good, but you don't have to own it. Same thing with the Use Your Illusion albums, 1 and 2. There are definitely some good moments on those, but overall they are a huge step down in quality from their debut and totally optional. And of course, due to Axl's rockstar ego, imploded the band shortly after those albums, and then he came back with Chinese Democracy, which of course is completely terrible. Now he's reunited with most of the original band members. Whether they produce new music or not, who knows? Whether it would be any good or not, who knows? At this point, who cares, right? At least that's my opinion of it. Now, this next band that I'm going to mention is absolutely one of my favorite bands. And their first 2 albums were a bit uneven. Those are the 2 that I don't have because those 2 albums, the production was, the songwriting was, honestly, listening to those 2 albums, I would kind of honestly have passed that band by and never really gave them a second thought. But thankfully, their first 2 albums are not the first 2 I heard by them. The band I'm talking about is Monster Magnet. This is their 3rd album, Dopes to Infinity, where they really, in my opinion, perfected their sound. Yeah, there were elements of it on their first 2 albums, but this one they finally got the production right. The songwriting chops definitely improved on this. This is an absolutely amazing album. Really, everything they've done after this has been really good. So, this is their 3rd album, Dopes to Infinity. Following that up, they did Power Trip, which had a somewhat minor hit, Space Lord, on it. After that, we have God Says No. I absolutely love this one. It's absolutely great. Followed that up with Monolithic Baby. Enjoy this one quite a bit. Then we got Four-Way Diablo. Absolutely great album. Well, who am I kidding? That's what I'm saying about all of these at this point. After that, they have Mastermind. And then their most recent album, Last Patrol. Now, they've done some reimagined versions of their last two albums. I think I might pick those up eventually, but that's not high priority. And also, they have a new album coming out early next year called Mindfucker. I'm sure it'll be quite good if it follows, well, in their footsteps of what they've been doing. I'm really looking forward to it. That's pretty much all I got to say about that band. So back to bands that have, put out some shitty albums. Now this band, this next one, is one of the big four thrash, and they put out some really consistently good material for most of their career. Their past couple of albums, well, more like past 4 albums have been 3 or 4 albums have been pretty lackluster. But before that, always did good stuff. Of course, I'm talking about Slayer! Here's their debut, Show No Mercy. It's a bit goofy, but I do enjoy it. After that, we got Haunting the Chapel. And we got Hell Awaits. Then, of course, we have their most well-regarded album, Rain in Blood. I think this should be in pretty much everybody's collection if you're a metal fan. It's pretty much a must-own. South of Heaven, another masterpiece. Season in the Abyss, another incredibly awesome album. They followed that up with Divine Intervention, and it was a bit of a step down from their previous albums, granted. It's not terrible or anything, but it's not as good as their previous couple. I think it's a little unfairly maligned. I think it does have a lot of really good moments on it, like Killing Fields, for example, is an incredibly great song. Then, of course, they did their covers album, Undisputed Attitude. I really enjoy this one. Then after that, they did have a bit of a misstep, but again, there's a lot of great moments on this album. I would still recommend this to hardcore Slayer fans, and that is Diabolus in Musica. Bitter Peace and Point on this, Screaming from the Sky. And there are some really awesome songs on this. Yes, there are some not so great moments too, but there you have it. They followed that up with God Hates Us All, and this is an absolutely great album in my opinion. It absolutely crushes. I love this one. Then they followed that up with Christ Illusion, and this one is honestly kind of mediocre. It's not terrible, but it's not really worth owning unless, if you're a hardcore fan, sure, but if not, give it a pass. After that, I don't own. That's the last Slayer album I own. After that, they did World Painted Blood. Again, meh. Now, they did come back a bit with Repentless. It's probably about as good as Diabolus in Musica. It definitely has some pretty good moments on it, but overall, it's still kind of a weakish album. At this point, I would honestly be totally fine with Slayer retiring since Dave Lombardo's out of the band and Jeff Hanneman is dead. I would be totally kosher with Slayer calling it a day. Alright guys, the next band in question is a band that, along with Fear Factory, really made a huge impact in the 90s in metal and kind of really kept the lights on. And in a lot of ways, they kind of, at least with their first 2 albums, they took what Pantera was doing and expanded it, made it even heavier, in my opinion. Quite frankly, I like a lot of their music better than Pantera. And the band that I am talking about, of course, is Machine Head. This is their debut, Burn My Eyes. It is absolutely amazing. Crushing, awesome groove metal. Second album was The More Things Change, and this is also incredibly great. Their third album was The Burning Red. I don't own that one. They went in a very much more of a new metal direction on that, and it's just not a very good album. They even have some rapping vocals on it. It's just not great. After that, they did an album called Supercharger, which is pretty meh. You know, it's not as bad as The Burning Red, but it's certainly not great. Neither one of those, in my opinion, is particularly worth owning, hence why I don't. They followed that up with Through the Ashes of Empires, and this is an absolutely fantastic album. I think it's a masterpiece in a lot of ways. Just absolutely great, very intricate, just an awesome overall album. A hugely successful comeback for them. They followed that up with The Blackening, which is absolutely amazing as well. After that, they followed that up with Unto the Locust, which I don't own, but added to my wish list tonight, actually, so hopefully I'll get it soon. And then their most recent album is Bloodstone and Diamonds now. I know they have a new album slated to come out very soon called Catharsis. In fact, the single has already been released on the internet. I'm going to wait and hold reserve judgment for that for me to hear it. I don't know, how it's going to be, but I'll find out, I guess, when it comes out and I get to listen to it. Anyway, the next band that we're going to talk about is definitely one of my favorites. They've never had great mainstream success here in the U.S., but they've had a fair amount of success overall, especially overseas. And the band I'm talking about is Iced Earth. This is their debut album, just self-titled. To be honest, I don't know the name of the vocalist on this one because it's not one of the main ones. I know, it's ridiculous. I'm a big fan of the band, and I don't know the name of the vocalist. That's how memorable he is. But, there you go. That's that album. They followed that up, and they switched vocalist. I believe it's a different guy here on Night of the Storm Rider, which is, I really love the album cover on this one. Very cool. There you go. But the thing is, at some point in their career, they're like, hey, we have those two albums, and people know them, but let's record them with our new vocalist, Matt Barlow. Well, new vocalist at that time. This is 20 years ago, so, but yeah, they re-recorded basically those two entire albums basically on this release here, which is Days of Purgatory. I would recommend getting this over their first two albums because the performances on this are way, way, way better. The production is way, way, way better than the first two albums. And Matt Barlow is a way, 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 way better singer than those first two singers were. So if you want to hear their early stuff, pick this up. After that, well, not after that, but they actually I'm going a little bit out of order, but their first studio album with Matt Barlow is Burnt Offerings, and this thing is an absolute beast. It's got a 15-minute epic song, Dante's Inferno, on it. It is absolutely awesome. They followed that up with The Dark Saga, and obviously it's based on Spawn. Absolutely great album. It's actually the first one, coincidentally, I heard by that band, and I fell in love with the band because of that album. They followed that up with Something Wicked, This Way Comes. Absolutely phenomenal album. And then this next one was their final album with Barlow the first time around. And, it is Horror Show. And it is awesome, in my opinion. And then Matt decided to leave the band. He went and became, after 9/11, he decided to go be a police officer. So he left the band, and then Ripper Owens from Judas Priest joined the band after that. And their first album they recorded was called The Glorious Burden. Released basically a whole lot of historical songs. I don't own that one. I just never picked it up. It's not particularly bad or anything, but I think it was, they were kind of adjusting to a new vocalist on that album. It's not my favorite Iced Earth album by any stretch, and it was a bit outside of what they normally do, but not bad overall, but not particularly great. It's optional to own that one, honestly. But then, before their next album, they decided to do an EP here. Again, this is not a must-have. This is Overture of the Wicked, which basically consists of them re-recording their classic Wicked trilogy from Something Wicked This Way Comes, as well as 10,000 Strong from their upcoming album. I enjoy this with Ripper Owen singing. Ripper has an absolutely awesome voice, so it's really nice to hear him sing those songs on this. And after that, they released Framing Armageddon. What do they call it? Framing Armageddon, it's just Something Wicked Part 1, basically. And this is definitely their finest hour with Ripper on vocals. This is an absolutely great album. I love this. Now, I don't own Framing Armageddon Part 2, which is the album that Matt Barlow returned to the band to record. Because honestly, it's just not that good. The songwriting on it wasn't nearly as strong as, Framing Armageddon Part 1. As much as I love Matt's vocals and I really like the band, it's just not that great of an album, hence why I've never picked it up, and I don't know if I ever will. But Matt was only back for one album. Then they decided to, they recruited Stu Block into the band, and they recorded this album called Dystopia. And I actually really enjoy this. This is my favorite album with Stu Block on it, ironically, their first one. They followed that up with Plagues of Babylon, and it's a good, solid album. Not as good as Dystopia, but I do enjoy it. And I don't own their most recent album because, well, I just find it very meh. Now, Iced Earth doesn't have any truly terrible albums, like a lot of the other bands that I've named off, but they certainly have a fair amount of meh music. And honestly, at this point, I don't really... I try my best not to collect any meh music. Sometimes I might buy an album like that, but for the most part, I only try to buy albums that I think pretty highly of. Anyway, the next band that I'm going to talk about is, well, actually, we're down to 4 more bands. The last 4 that I'm going to talk about are some of the most famous bands in metal. Easily some of the most famous bands in metal, and I'm going to start off by we're going to break it up into British and American bands, and I'll start with the American bands. So I'm going to talk probably about the second most famous band of the big 4, and of course that is Megadeth. This is the remastered version of their debut, Killing Is My Business. This is the only album of theirs where I specifically would recommend you get the remaster over the original. The original production sounds like garbage, and it really takes the intensity of this album down. On the remaster, it sounds a million times better. It really brings out the intensity of these songs and just elevates this album to a much higher level. I would definitely recommend picking this up if you're a Megadeth fan. Absolutely. They followed that up, of course, with... I gotta get these in order here. They followed that up, of course, with Peace Sells. Awesome album, absolute masterpiece. Then we got So Far, So Good, So What. Incredible. Rust in Peace. This is a technical thrash masterpiece, one of the best in the genre ever. Now, then they've got Countdown to Extinction. Killer album. And then we got Euthanasia. Now, it wasn't as much of a success as the other albums. It was a bit different, but I really enjoy this album quite a bit. Even though it was slowed down quite a bit for Megadeth, it's still one of my favorite albums by theirs, or by them. Then there was an EP. This, Hidden Treasures, I don't even think it's in print anymore. But I would say this is only for diehard Megadeth fans. If you're not a diehard, you could skip this, but I really do enjoy a good number of songs on this. Next up, we have Cryptic Writings, which is definitely their most commercial sounding album in my opinion. It has some really good moments on it. It's not as solid as, well, and it kind of started a little bit of a decline at this point in quality in my opinion. I mean, this isn't bad or anything. It's pretty good. There's a lot of really good songs on it. But it definitely is a much more commercial feeling album. And then, of course, after that, they released Risk, which is highly, highly mediocre. It's not nearly as terrible as I think as a lot of people say, but it is not great. Really, the only good songs on the only thing that's really a highlight to me is the last two songs, Time, the Beginning, and the End. Those are awesome. The rest of it, highly skippable. Then they released The World Needs a Hero again. This is fairly mediocre as well. It's a lot more traditional Megadeth sound than Risk, but yeah, it's not great. It's okay. There's a few good songs on it, but it's mostly passable, skippable, I mean. And then after that, the band actually went away for a very short amount of time. Dave Mustaine had an arm injury, thought he would never play guitar again, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what that did, but I think it gave him a huge kick in the ass to write some good music again, because when he returned, they returned with this. The System Has Failed. Killer album. I love this one. Absolutely great comeback. Followed that up with United Abominations. Fantastic album. After that, we've got Endgame, which is really solid. I really enjoy this one a lot. Not quite as good as their past couple ones, but still definitely worth owning. Now, after that, they released 13, which I don't own, because this is kind of, it's okay. It's not, it's a middle of the road album. It's all right, right? It sounds just like, it's not nearly as cohesive as their other albums, because basically what 13 is, some of the songs were written recently, a lot of them were written at different points in Megadeth's career, and it just sounds like kind of an incohesive mess in my opinion. After that, they released Super Collider, which is by far their worst album. It's even worse than Risk. It's pretty irredeemable, boring, for lack of a better term, dad rock. It's really bad. Definitely not worth getting. And then recently, their newest album, Dystopia, it came back with, and this is a great album. Definitely one of my favorite Megadeth albums at this point, so definitely worth having. I'm sure by now you're figuring out who the next band is. The most famous metal band on Earth, of course, is who I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and just dive into this. Of course, I'm talking about Metallica. Obviously, this is their debut, Kill 'Em All. Great album. Following up with Ride Z Lightning, original and remaster. What do I need to say about it? Master of Puppets. Come on, right? And Justice for All. Killer stuff. Black Album. Obviously the best-selling metal album of all time, and it still sells thousands of copies a month somehow. Now we're going to talk about, I don't know, I guess, no, we don't have to talk about that one yet. This is their live album from around that time, Live Shit, Binge, and Birch. I quite enjoy it. Now we're going to talk... Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to talk about this album here, Load. Very controversial. Obviously, they changed the logo on this. They looked quite different, and they really changed their sound on this one. It's definitely not their finest hour, but it's, in my opinion, still worth owning because there are some really great songs on this. I really enjoy. I mean, Bleeding Me is just, it's on a whole other level. No, it's not very metal compared to a lot of their other stuff, but it is definitely on just a higher level as a song. It's absolutely fantastic. The Outlaw Torn is another great song. Some really good songs on this one. I enjoy The House That Jack Built, Until It Sleeps. I even enjoy King Nothing, even though it's just a retread of Enter Sandman. It's still good. Thorn Within is actually quite good as well as Ronnie. So I definitely think this one is worth owning if you're a big Metallica fan. But, to be fair, it is skippable depending on your tastes, right? I don't have Reload because Reload is just highly mediocre. Very lame overall. Definitely not worth having. But after that, they recorded some new covers and, of course, re-released Garage Days into this compilation, Garage Inc. Totally awesome compilation. Most definitely worth owning. After that, Jason Newsted left the band right before their next album, which, of course, is Saint Anger. And no, I do not own that because it is an absolute turd. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible album. Just, it sucks. The songwriting on it's really bad. The drums sound like they were in a tin can. It's just not good and definitely not worth owning. I have a live album of theirs from right before Saint Anger. This is actually, I think, the final recording with Jason Newsted on it. I could be wrong. S&M. I enjoy this. Then after they followed, then they came back with their best album, since the Black Album after Saint Anger, and that is Death Magnetic. I actually really like that album, and you're saying, well, why don't you own it? Well, the reason I don't own it is simply because the production on that album is so bad. Loudness War, Brick Wall Limited. Honestly, the sound quality on it is shit. Even though the songs are pretty good, it sounds terrible. So if you want to listen to that one, I would definitely recommend, just downloading a much more recording of it that has a lot more dynamic range, like the Guitar Hero version or other versions. There's plenty of them floating around the internet if you want to hear it. And that, of course, leads us to their most excuse me. Oh my God! Most recent album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, and this album is absolutely fantastic. This crushes everything they've done since the Black Album very easily. This is top notch, actually. I love the hell out of this album, even though I've yet to get tired of it. I absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. It's a great return to form for Metallica, and this is a must-have for any Metallica fan at all. So there you go. There's that one. So now we are going to talk about some British bands. And both of these bands are extremely famous. And at some point, I'm going to have to do a video comparing the two. And I think I'm going to start off with the band with, I guess, a few less misses. I don't know. Hard to say. They have a fair amount of misses in their catalog. But we're going to go ahead and talk about them. I am talking about the mighty Iron Maiden, right? This is obviously their debut with Paul, and Paul Di'Anno was on their first two albums, and honestly, this is a great debut. This is totally awesome. Love this. Alright. Album number 2, Killers. I love this one too. Absolutely great album. And then, of course, they followed it up. Bruce Dickinson joined the band. Boom. The Number of the Beast. Totally incredibly great album. After that, we got Peace of Mind. Another killer album. Power Slave. Wonderful. Somewhere in Time. Awesome. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Again, awesome. After that, we have No Prayer for the Dying, which is honestly meh, mediocre. Kind of a miss, but I still own it. After that, we got Fear of the Dark, which is honestly killer in my opinion. A huge return to form for the band after their last one. And this, of course, was their final album with Dickinson the first time. This is absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, we got the Blaze Bayley albums. I don't own either one of those. The X Factor and Virtual XI. The X Factor is actually decent as far as an album goes. It's not great, and there's some good stuff on it, but I just don't own it. And Virtual XI or Virtual 11, I don't care for that one really much at all. Obviously, after those two albums, they're like, oh my God, we got to do something. We got to, you know, obviously they reunited with Bruce Dickinson, and boom! This was the result. Brave New World. Oh my God, do I love this album. Let me count the ways. This thing kicks ass. Okay. They followed that up with Dance of Death. Again, fantastic album. After that, we got A Matter of Life and Death. Awesome, awesome album. Not as it's much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Proggy than their last couple of albums, you know, before that, but I still really enjoy it. And then after that, they have The Final Frontier. I don't own that one because it's just kind of, again, that to me is a very meh type of album. But they came back with The Book of Souls. And yeah, it's a little bit bloated. It's a double album, but there's a lot of good stuff on this. I do quite enjoy it. So, there. There's them. Now, gee, who could the final band be that I'm going to talk about? It's so hard to figure out, right? This is, of course, one of the most important metal bands ever. They were very instrumental in the formation of the heavy metal sound. Of course, I'm talking about Judas Priest. I don't own their first album, Rock-A-Rolla, because it's just not very good. It's really not. It's a very mediocre album, and I guess if you're an absolute diehard Judas Priest fan, you should own it. But for me, it's like, meh, no. But this album, Sad Wings of Destiny, holy shit, this is an absolute stone cold classic. And of course, we got Sin After Sin. Oy. Stained Class. Hellbent for Leather or Killing Machine over in the UK. British Steel. Then they had Point of Entry, but that one is, to borrow a phrase from my English friends, that one's a bit rubbish, so I haven't really bothered trying to pick up Point of Entry. And then we've got Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith. Then we've got, which one was first, Turbo or Ram It Down? Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, Turbo. Yeah, that one is pretty much shite in my opinion. Turbo, not so good. Ram It Down. Ram It Down's kind of mediocre. I don't own that one either, obviously, because I'm not showing them. Then they released, holy shit, an absolute fucking incredibly awesome album, Painkiller. Wow. All I can say about this album is wow. Then Rob Halford split with the band, and they kind of went dormant for a while. So, you know, they were just floating around, and then they decided, hey, we better find a vocalist. And, of course, circles us back to Tim Ripper Owens and this album here, Jugulator. It's not the greatest album ever, but I still actually really enjoy this. You know, I think this is a worthy addition to the Priest catalog. A lot of people hate it, but personally, I really like this. That's just my opinion, though. I don't own the follow-up album to that, Demolition. That one is terrible. Just no other way to put it. Absolute shit. Then, obviously, with reunions going nuts, they decided to release Angel of Retribution, and Rob is back for this one. And this is an absolutely fantastic album. I love this one. Okay, they followed that up with Nostradamus. And I don't know what I'm looking at, guys. Nostradamus. Holy shit. And it's okay. It's not the greatest album ever, but I got this cheap. That's why I have it. I do enjoy it. There's a lot of good stuff on here, but of course there is some filler too. But overall, I think it's pretty solid and worth owning if you're a big Judas Priest fan. And of course, that brings us to their most recent album, Redeemer of Souls. And I actually really enjoyed this one. There's a lot of really good songs on this. Really good album. And I know they're recording another one. Looking forward to hearing it. I'm thinking it will probably be good. But that pretty much wraps it up for bands that I have no real intention of trying to fill at Discographies. Yes, I've heard a lot of releases by these bands, but whatever. If I complete the Discographies, whatever. It's not, certainly not a priority, and some I would actively avoid it because, well, they have some really terrible albums. So that pretty much wraps this up. I want to say thank you so much for watching this long video. I know this was, you know, just a whole bunch of showing CDs and stuff. I tried to be as quick as possible. But that's basically it. If you enjoyed this, thumbs up. If you hate me, thumbs down. Share, subscribe, all that. Thanks so much. I'll catch you guys next time.